we now actually know that thought's beneath the level of awareness. We had understood our mind to be an orderly processor. Come on, we were all born and raised on brand ladders, and you have to start at the first level before you can step up to the next rung of the ladder and the next rung of the ladder. But we now know that the mind is actually an associative processor, and it's nothing about ladders. It's about connecting to other memories that are already there, and it can be at any level you want. And finally, we understood decisions to be the output of conscious deliberation. You know, we could see how we were making decisions. So we thought we knew how we were making decisions. We didn't know what we didn't know. We didn't know there was this unconscious actually fueling our decisions. But we now know that decisions are primarily felt, not made. Actually, it's probably the best quote to capture this all up comes from Daniel Kahneman, who's a Nobel laureate in economics, even though he's a cognitive psychologist. Wrote a very powerful and valuable book, Thinking Fast and Slow. But as he says, disbelief isn't an option, as this is science. It makes lots of people uncomfortable, but you will get there because it is science. It isn't going to change. So let's stop for a minute on, the mind is an associative processor. What's happening is that images are talking to images, and electricity is firing between the neurons. So what are images? Images are actually mental representations. I know when we hear images, we all like to think that those are pictures. But remember that we're actually taking data in through all of our 5 senses. And each of those gets trapped as an image. I mean, that's literally what it's called. It's a neuronal cluster, clusters of neurons and synapses. But we know what a peach tastes like. So if we taste another peach, it's matching up with our memory of peaches, and we know it's a peach. We know what the smell of a rose is. We have an image of a rose in our mind. It just happens to be an image that represents smell, not just a picture of a rose. So what happens in our mind when someone's actually talking to us? Well, imagine someone says Coca-Cola. What comes to mind? I mean, we all sort of, if you force us, think that, well, our mind works in words. I mean, we think in words. Thought is word-based. It's not word-based at all. When someone says Coca-Cola, these words don't pop up in your head. What happens is what pops up in your head is a whole bunch of images. And by the way, some of those would be sounds. You could hear maybe carbonation, et cetera. But that's actually what's happening when the images are moving around and we are actually thinking. Thought is working in images. It's not working in words. When we actually hear words, we have to mentally envision what they mean. So we actually have to go through a translation process. But we as marketers spend an enormous amount of time figuring out how to get the words right. And we don't spend nearly as much time that we should as getting the image right. So with all the images coming, what's actually happening in there? Basically, the minds are massive pattern recognition machines. And we're trying to there's incoming data. We're trying to match it with what already sits in our unconscious memory so that we can make sense of it. We are pattern matchers. When new information comes at us, we have to make sense of it by connecting something that we already know. We have to put the unknown to the known. It's the only way we can make sense of things. Now, thought works beneath the level of our awareness. We've talked a little bit about this, whether it's 99% beneath our level of awareness, 95 or 90, it's an enormous amount that we haven't spent any time talking about. But by the way, it would have to work beneath our level of awareness. An enormous amount would have to work because there are 11 million bits of data, and that's a conservative estimate, coming at us every second. Somehow we have to process that because we only have the capabilities to process 40 bits consciously. So obviously it has to be firing beneath the level of our awareness. What happens is it's also constantly working, and we're not always aware it's constantly working. How many times have you run into someone like in the grocery store, and you're like, what's their name, what's their name, what's their name? And there's somewhere out there you feel that you've met them before. Anyway, you have a quick conversation. You hope they don't realize that you don't know their name, and you go off and continue your grocery, and you're focused in the dog food aisle, and then you go, Steve, that's his name. And you weren't even thinking about it. Just because you're not consciously focused on it, it doesn't mean your unconscious isn't processing. It's still working. It's still whirring away, and that's why those things just sort of pop into your mind. Another important thing you need to understand is that we are constantly predicting what's happening. The brain is a sense-making organ, so what enables us to make sense of the world. So as we see something, we're trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together. I know what you look up there, and technically you see sort of three random, well, not random, but three Pac-Man-like figures. If I put you through a brain imaging instrument or equipment, that would actually register as, yes, you'd register the Pac-Man, but you'd also register the triangle. There's not a triangle there, but your brain has absolutely put a triangle in there. Basically, the brain records what you perceive. So there's lots of information coming at you, but how you perceive it is what actually gets recorded in your mind. One of my favorite examples of this is an ad from a few years ago that I'll show you now that really took this, I think they'll definitely accidentally, but really engaged our minds and let us fill in the blanks very powerfully to help tell their story.